Welcome to A Lunch with Biggie, a podcast about small business and creatives sharing their stories and inspiring you. My guest today has the ability to dive into the human psyche, blur the line between reality and deception. He's a mentalist who fooled the famous Penn and Teller on Fool Us. Please welcome mentalist, speaker, and corporate entertainer Keith Kahn. What's going on, Keith?
What's up, Biggie? How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you taking some time during my lunch break. What's your usual go-to lunch or sandwich?
Have you heard of this place called Subway? No, I'm just kidding. Well, here we're kind of spoiled because we have some really good sandwich spots. It's tough to choose just one, but I'm actually craving this today, and we'll
Okay.
probably stop over there at some point. But
Okay.
Stasio's,
Oh yeah.
yeah, the flagship sandwich there is definitely one of the
The
top things.
Stasio is what you usually get?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's another place. I think it's called Badass Sandwiches.
Yep.
Yeah,
I know John. He's awesome. Yeah,
their
great food there.
flagship sandwich is really good as well.
Yes. You know, you really can't go wrong. I tell people, literally I tell people when they ask me like where, I'm like, just go to the Milk District. I call it the Sandwich District. There's like 4 or 5 spots there you can pretty much walk and eat at, and it's amazing. So I definitely that's a good one. Now, and I know obviously people pander and code to me like a sandwich, but if it's not sandwich, like do you have like other go-to lunch thing that you usually go with?
Yeah, I get into this habit where I'll fall in love with a place and then I'll just find myself going there again and again. And it's not a sandwich, but it's literally the other one that I'm like, okay, what are we doing today? Is it Stasio's or Sus High?
Oh,
It's like,
that's a good one too. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
great one. They do a good job,
Hmm.
and they've grown quite a bit, which is amazing. They also UCF alums
Yeah.
as well, which is great. Um, okay, so let's talk a little bit about. I'm very intrigued by all this, everything that you do. I want to know a little bit more, and for folks that don't know, what exactly is a mentalist, and how did all that come about? Like, how did you get that? How did you get started in it?
That's a great question. A mentalist is sort of like a specialist in magic. So if you think of a general practitioner doctor versus a neurosurgeon, they're both doctors, but one just sort of specializes in something. And so for me, you'll never see me as a mentalist make something float or vanish or anything like that. But I'll do things like mind reading and predictions and more, slightly more sophisticated cerebral magic.
Okay. I love it. And then how did you get started in it?
So I started really early because I wanted to be a hostage negotiator when I was like 10 years old or so. And then when I was 11, I wanted to be a magician. So I started doing magic on my 11th birthday and kept doing that until I was about 14. So started doing magic at 11, performed for friends and family, but at 14, I started doing shows for strangers in bars and clubs and places I wasn't allowed to be in really because I wasn't old enough. So they would escort me inside, have me perform, and then walk me back out to the lobby. But it went really well. Everyone loved it, and I just kept doing that. Around that time, 14, 15, I met a hypnotist who introduced me to mentalism. And then I sort of rebranded because I looked at my show and it was pretty much all mentalism. I just didn't have the word for it. And then it went from there to me going to college, getting a degree in psychology and criminal profiling. And now it's sort of all of those things put together.
So let's rewind on a few things because there's a few things for me based on my story, like what I've seen and read about you as I was researching. So one is like 10 years old, hostage negotiator. Like where did that even come from that you were like, hey, I'm like, this is what I want to do? Was it a movie, a show? Was there anything that kind of triggered that?
I don't know, man. Maybe I was a weird kid. I mean, I like the idea of the crime fighting type things.
Yeah.
And then I remember even watching like Walker, Texas Ranger as a kid. And so I'm not sure where it came from, but I thought it was really cool to be able to have that level of persuasion and use it for a good purpose because we hear
Yeah.
about manipulation
Yep.
used so negatively, but when a baby cries, that's manipulating its mother into feeding it and stuff. And like
Yeah.
there are ways that you can, for lack of a better word, manipulate or persuade or influence or make suggestions for the betterment of things. And so that was the first thing that made me realize that, and I thought it was really cool.
So at what point, because okay, so you mentioned that you did, let's kind of continue on the story on that, because like you said you went to UCF and you studied, I know you studied psychology, criminal profiling. Where was it, like at what point did you kind of go like, hey, this is something I want to transition into like full-time performer? Was there like something that occurred? What kind of led to it? I'm just kind of curious on like that, like let's, so we can kind of finish the timeline of that, and then we can kind of go more into all that other stuff that you're doing right now.
Yeah, it was pretty instant. I started doing it at my birthday party, and the adults were fooled by it.
Yeah.
And more than that, they were entertained. It was really cool seeing them not be able to explain something, and it really came through that like how it was genuine astonishment. They weren't just like when we go and see a show in the theater, people clap, but that's not a natural response. That's a trained response. When you're actually blown away or astonished, like your jaw just drops and you got no words. And that was the kind of thing at 11 that I was seeing. And so it didn't take long for me to be like, all right, well, I guess this is what I want to do. And it just kind of stuck with it. And even today, I'll meet people from, run into people from middle school or high school, like years ago, and they'll comment on how, like, wow, man, you said you wanted to do this and you're still doing it. That's crazy.
Wow. So when you went to UCF, you knew like, hey, I'm gonna do. I'm like, was there still that thought process since you were doing criminal profiling psychology of like maybe doing FBI, like maybe hostage negotiation type stuff, or was it always kind of like as you were doing that, you're like, yeah, I'm doing this, but I really just want to perform.
I think that I went to college sort of as a backup plan
Okay.
because this is a risky thing. Like we'll talk more about
Yeah.
it, but it's very easy to forget about the business side of showbiz. And so you are wearing many hats and you're in all of these roles. And when you start, you just want to perform and make people happy and entertain. And you quickly find out that you need to know all of these other things. And so it's difficult and it made sense to have a backup plan,
Yeah.
but it was probably I did dual enrollment as well, so I was going to college for junior and senior year of high school, and I'd say probably about by the time I was ready to graduate high school, I was like, yeah, we'll do this to like appease my mom and anyone that
Check
was
the
worried
box.
about the career, right? But really, this is just not like at least I'm taking psychology and things that interest me because I
Yeah.
don't think I'm going to end up actually working a normal job in that field.
And obviously, what's also great about it is it does feel it is in the field of what you're currently doing. In the sense of psychology, the psyche, and all those things. And you did kind of transition very well. So obviously, you may be reading my notes about the whole idea about wearing many hats. Because and that's something that I think I even mentioned to you that that I appreciate entertainers, artists, like musicians, things like that, because they are kind of just like they are small businesses. They are wearing multiple hats, having to do everything from honing in your craft, but at the same time also doing the marketing, the social, like getting your own gigs if you don't have if you don't have representation and stuff like that. So like, how do you balance it all when it comes to all that?
Yeah, it's not easy. And I talk to other entertainers about this all the time because we'll see world-class performers, guys that are just incredible and do things that it would take me years to practice these sleight. I don't do sleight of hand so much, but there are guys that I know that can do insane things and they aren't able to work full time as a performer because there's the whole business side that comes with it. And then I'll see guys that they're okay, like they're good enough, but they're crushing it because they're really good at marketing and business. And so my goal is to be all of that, and
Yeah.
I bounce back and forth between spending a lot of time on growing the business and the marketing and networking and making connections. But then I'll just go on these creative hiatuses where I'm creating and just trying to do the most impossible things that I can. And so, for example, I work with consultants. It's kind of a dirty secret of magic for some reason, but anybody that you see on TV, David Blaine, Chris Angel, these guys have a team behind them, consultants, other creative people that help them do impossible things. And so, I don't know, sometimes it's the ego, like they just want to be the guy that does it.
Yeah.
But I give massive props to the people that I work with behind the scenes. And so I have a trip like that coming up to make sure that it is well rounded, and not only is the show incredible, but it's getting seen by people. It's getting out there with marketing and sales.
No, that's awesome, and I think that's so super important when it comes to those things because you know, and you do. It's awesome to be able to get help and things like that. During my research, you had brought up something that I thought was very interesting. That's kind of similar in the sense of like what all small businesses go to. You mentioned something about how it's about personal connection and the ability to adapt. And I kind of wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about that, about the importance of being able to adapt. Because I also look at it as like as a small business, obviously we all have to adapt, but when you're performing, I was thinking I put myself in your shoes and I'm like you're performing and yeah like there's like a human psyche but you have like an unknown element and that's the audience member that you're interacting with and having to adapt depending on what they do. So I kind of wanted to get a little bit more context and just like a little bit more about the importance of being able to adapt and kind of bend with the opportunities and the situations that come, whether in business or even when you're performing it in your act.
Yeah, one thing that's really cool about the show is that you never know what you're going to get because it's based on other people's thoughts and what they're
Yeah.
thinking in the moment. And so I do like that because it keeps it fresh for me. Every show's different, and so that's cool. And then sometimes it plays in your favor, and sometimes it doesn't. Like I'll have people think of or say the craziest things on stage, things that I don't even know if I'm allowed to say on this podcast. And then other times you'll get really crazy surprises. Like there was a moment that there was one show that I did, and I remember this moment where I was able to tell someone about something very specific from her past, like very personal. And it turns out her husband of like 20 years, who was sat beside her, didn't even know this detail and was floored for it to surface. So um, that was cool. Just there's a lot of variety and wild cards that come up. I I don't know that it's created many problems though. I can usually handle it well, and I think it just comes from the experience. Like we don't, fortunately, I don't get many hecklers,
Mm-hmm.
like a comedian might. And then I think the biggest thing I run into is people that don't know me or don't know about the stuff that I've done, and now they're seeing me for the first time, maybe without a proper intro or anything, and they're thinking like, "All right, who is this guy? What does he want?" And that's always rough for me, like coming in. But I love the moment where I can show them something really powerful, really impossible, and I see that the second it switches, and they're like, "Oh, okay, this guy's good," and then they want you to stay, and so
Yeah.
that's always a fun part.
Okay, so can you give me because you said so you made a you as you're telling the story like my brain's like okay how like when you said that you were having like with a moment with the audience member and you kind of got into the whole idea of like some memories or thoughts from her past, can you give me like is there like a visual or something just to kind of like is it something that just like pops in your head as you're talking to them? There's a connection. What is it that causes that you're able to get into into? And I'm not trying. Obviously, you're not going to tell me your secrets, but I at least want to know like, is it a visual thing? Like when you see it, like what is it that you see, or what is it that comes in? Is it like someone's talking in your ear? I don't know. Like, are you a visual person? What is it when you see those things come about, and you're able to be like, oh, let me tell you about this person and like whatever, and then you have like this you're like pulling something right out of like that no one else would know.
Yeah, for me, it's mostly visual, and it's also not a perfect science or
Yeah,
anything like that. And so I think it's a combination of visual, verbal, and nonverbal cues that all sort of come together. People ask me all the time, is this real? Is it fake? And I think that's the line that I like to sort of blur because,
yeah,
yes, I have a background in magic. I also have a real background with psychology and criminal profiling. And so I like to blur that line and make them question what's what. And I never make any claims because then I feel I don't need I don't feel the need to make any disclaimers and say like, oh, this is all an illusion or this is all real or anything like that. I just want people to come and see the show and walk away with the viewpoints that they already have. Like I don't want to change anyone's mind. If you
yeah.
believe it, great. If you don't, great. As long as you're entertained.
No, that's great. And then I know you mentioned consultants, and I know you mentioned like, is there like a process? Like, can we talk a little bit about that creative process on how you come up with your performances? Like, is there like a theme that you're kind of like you start off like kind of like it's telling a story as you go through it, or what is it that you come up with? And as you progress, like obviously you learn new skills. So I'm kind of curious on like how that creative process is.
Yeah, so the creative process is, I find for me personally, I work really well with at least one other person because I can then talk the ideas out. So even if they're just acting as a sounding board, it's great. But it can start anywhere. So, for example, when I was on Penn and Teller Fool Us, the whole idea for that routine started with the visual of Penn doing like the video mashup thing. And if you don't know what I'm talking about and you're
Yeah,
listening,
talk
you
a
can
little bit
find it on
about share
YouTube.
by all means. Feel free to share that.
Yeah, so there's a show called Penn and Teller Fool Us. It's on the CW, and they're, I believe, in season 10 right now. So it's been running for a long time. Penn and Teller, of course, are these icons of magic. They've been around for decades, one of the longest running shows in Las Vegas. They've been put into The Simpsons and all
Yeah,
kinds of
they're
things like that.
everywhere.
Yeah. And so they have a show. It's filmed at the Rio in Las Vegas where magicians and mentalists from around the world come on their stage, perform for them, and try to fool them. And so I was fortunate enough to get the green light to come on the show in season 7, and I actually performed for them and fool them. And so we have the trophy, which is right here.
It's awesome.
So yeah, so that was super cool. Still really proud of that whole thing. And you'll have to watch the video. You can find it on YouTube or on my website, kongmentalist.com, or search up Keith Kong, Penn and Teller Fool Us. But in there, there's a moment where there's a video mashup that plays. And if you can imagine Penn from the duo singing a song, but it's done one word at a time using footage over the span of the previous 6 seasons, chopped up one word at a time. And so that was the original idea for the whole thing. It started with the question, what do I think would look good on TV? Like, what's a good visual? What would be good for the show? And that was the moment I started with. And then I built around it. So I was like, okay, and what context does this make sense in? Well, why would he be singing a song? And then it changes too. Like the original explanation was he's in a karaoke bar, and we went down like it was completely different, but that's where the song list came from, because like in a karaoke bar you might get a list of songs to choose from. And so we kept the list of songs, and then we also started thinking, well, if I do this video mashup, people are going to think, well, he just has a video for every song. So how do we solidify this and make it real and bring it into the physical world? And I thought, well, a platinum record would be cool because that goes along with music and singing. And so it all started with that one image and kind of branched out from there. We started
Wow.
making changes as we went. But we always start with the mindset that anything is possible. Like we don't even have a method because we're making impossible things happen, but we don't worry about how we're going to do it. We just dream it first and then figure it out.
That's crazy. What have you seen? Has it and obviously that this is like that's like a great like way of like being on the show, being recognized. Obviously, it's probably opened some other additional opportunities, networking opportunities for you, for it. But what would you say is like? Has that been like one of your like your even though obviously like on TV it's all of that like has that been your greatest performance that you've done, or has there been other performances that you're like, man, this performance even probably even smokes the heck out of this one?
It's in terms of well, it's tough to say because
Yeah,
yes, I was able to leverage that a lot, and it was great for my career, great for recognition and things like that. I noticed that the phone was ringing after that aired, and it was
yeah,
more so like we want you specifically, opposed to hey, can you give me a quote for this so then I can go and shop it around. It
yeah,
wasn't less of a budget-based decision solely and more of an impact-based one. They were like,
yeah.
we saw you, we know you can do a good job. We want you to come and do this. And so that was super beneficial. But in terms of performances in general, I've had some crazy stories, like some that I mean, like there's one of my favorites is showing up to an event and the luggage didn't show up. And the airline promised that they would rush it over. It would get to the venue by 7. The show started at 7:30, And at about 7:25, I got a text, like an update text saying that the bags would arrive at 9:30, and 200 people waiting outside to be let in. And we pulled it off and did a 45-minute show with no props. I was like, all right, what do we have? Do we have duct tape? Do you guys have magazines? And the fact that I was able to do the show, and then the event planner at the end was like, wow, I don't think anyone could have known that your stuff didn't show up. They were really happy with it and ended up bringing me back the following year for the full show. Like, that was a crazy story.
Wow.
There's certain shows that stand out where the audience is just such a great audience, the standing ovations and stuff. I did a show at a swingers hotel takeover
No
once,
way.
which, yeah, and great show, like such a great crowd, very open-minded, as you might guess.
Yeah.
So tons of really, really good memories over the years. It's been 19 years now that since I first started.
That's That's insane, and you can basically thank your mom for it because she's the one that originally you found a magic set in your house for your birthday, and you got to start doing it before. So, from what I've read, so
Yes.
it's pretty amazing. So your mom kind of knew that's what you were into, and kind of opened the door for you on that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I knew my 11th birthday was coming up. I started asking everybody for magic, and my mom was the one that got that kit.
That's awesome. Hey, since since we talk about, okay, obviously, like in the sense of, and I'm going to go back to the idea of the psychology, the criminal, not even the criminal side of it, but the psychology, being a mentalist, and kind of seeing people's psyche and kind of diving into human psyche and stuff like that. I'm kind of curious on if you have noticed or seen or ever paid attention to, like, is there a common trait for, like, maybe like a creative or a highly successful person? What are some of the things that you've kind of seen or connected and you're like, "Oh, I could totally see that because they have these characteristics or they have these certain traits." I'm kind of curious if you've ever seen that or thought of that.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few. So people often think of IQ, intelligence quotient, and attribute that to success. But actually, when we look at the longitudinal studies, which means over many years, like following the same subject over the course of 30 or so years, we find that the main correlation between high IQ individuals is salary. People with higher IQs tend to make more money in their lifetime. But a better indicator of success in general than IQ is EQ, your emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is your ability to postpone immediate gratification for a better outcome in the end. So the example I always give is like, yeah, I'd love to go to this party tonight, but if I skip the party, I stay home and study, then I'll pass the test, which will lead to better results that will last longer and that sort of thing. And if you can do that and postpone immediate gratification, then you have a higher chance of success. It's like your willingness to succeed is directly correlated with your willingness to endure pain and sort of suffer
And
through the
sacrifice.
rest. Yeah. So that's a massive one. The other thing I would say is there's just there's things that will attribute to success. And I came up with a formula for this. I call it the success map. And MAP stands for mindset, actions, and ploys. And mindset, we know what that is, actions, taking action, and ploys, a way to think of that is like techniques, smarter ways of doing things. And so of those three, which would you say is most important? Mindset, actions, or ploys?
I guess I want to say ploys. I don't know why. Like that's the one that kind of, just because I feel like if you have the mind and the actions, then you basically are now are able to create something that actually evolves change.
Yeah, the ploys are definitely fun. That's
Yeah.
probably one of my favorites, but it wouldn't be the most important. And here's why. It's because you could have all of the fanciest techniques and ploys, you could know them all, and you could have the best mindset, but unless you take action, then none of it even matters. And
True.
so the way to think of it is it starts with the actions, because just by doing the actions, you will inevitably see results, which then boosts your mindset and refines the ploys over time. So the people that succeed are constantly taking action, even when they don't want to. Like everyone wants to stay motivated, but it's about you don't have to like it. You just have to do it. Like just
Yeah.
do the actions.
So I like that because of the fact that I'm kind of curious when you're doing actions. A lot of times people will hold off on doing actions because of failure. And because they don't want to, like, what if I mess up or what if I don't, even though the idea is obviously if you continuously do action and actually continue moving forward, if you are failing and you keep getting up and learning from it, you basically will get better at it. So I'm kind of curious because like that's a failure is such a tough one for so many people. I feel like especially for small businesses or people that don't want to take a risk or chance.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like, and I know for you, I can imagine like self teaching yourself, learning through trial and error, having to do like, kind of like be able to figure out, and you've had those moments. Can you talk a little bit about the amount of like time and preparation, practice, and as well as also kind of like that, I guess, how to, I guess, have that mental state of getting overcoming the hurdle of the idea of failure or not wanting to fail and just kind of getting over yourself. I think I'm always kind of, I mean, heck, if that's like the mental trick that I get from you, that would be great. In the sense that if there's something that allows us to kind of get over ourselves or out of our minds, because it's so easy for us to kind of, talk ourselves out of things sometimes.
Yeah, I think failure, like you're gonna fail, and if you are, it's gonna be better to fail faster, right? Because then you mentioned it, you can learn something from a failure. Like a failure can then turn into a lesson learned, which is something new for next time. The problem is if you fail and don't learn the lesson and you keep sort of repeating the cycle. But I fail all the time. I feel like I failed today. Um, I had some really nice events lined up and stuff, and probably in the last hour, I'm sorry, not last hour, in the last 12 hours, probably had about $10,000 worth of shows sort of pulled out from under me that I
Wow.
was expecting to come to fruition. But at the same time, I also have other really nice things that are in the works. And so I think the goal is to just create enough volume to where it negates the failures, to where it doesn't even matter because you've got so much else going on. And so just increasing the volume and understanding, like, yeah, failure is definitely going to happen. But the other lesson when it comes to failure, I think one thing that I really like is it comes from the book, The Four Agreements. And it's the agreement of never taking anything personally. And so that helps with failure as well because people take that rejection so personally. And one of my favorite quotes, it comes from another mentalist, a guy named Darren Brown, and he said, I, I, I'm maybe paraphrasing, but he says something along the lines of, we'd worry much less about what others think of us if we only knew how seldom they do.
True. It's true. That I actually had a previous guest tell me the same thing. They, in the sense of, they're like, "Hey, don't worry about what like people aren't thinking about you. You're so caught up on what you think that they're thinking of, but like you just post what you're gonna post, do whatever." He's like, "No one really cares.
Yeah.
You just get so far into your head that you just kind of." And it's true. I've also thought in the mindset of having, if you're gonna like you said, fail fast, fail forward. Because in that way you're kind of like continuing, the momentum as you continue on, which I think is huge.
Now, I'll give you the perfect example of this. And by the way, that in psychology we call that the spotlight effect. Like when you feel like you have a spotlight on you and really no one cares. If you want to test it, like just for one day, adopt a caveman hygiene and like go out, don't shower. You'll feel gross, but you'll see like people don't even bat an eye. It's
Yeah.
wild. And so back to the topic of failure, like I failed massively because not many people know this, but you may have seen me on Penn and Teller Fool Us in season 7, but not many people know that I was actually there in Las Vegas filming, performing for Penn and Teller in season 6 of the show. And it went really well. I thought everything looked great. I did not fool them. I didn't expect to fool them. I just said, this is going to be something that will look good on TV. And it ended up going great, but then not airing. The producers sent an email and they said, hey, like this was a network decision. We think you were great and stuff. But unfortunately, they decided to cut that segment. And that was a massive failure, especially because at the time I had no other national TV credits or anything. And so it was like the rug got pulled out. But I tried to fail forward and I said, well, the only way that I'm going to be okay with this is if I come up with something else. The producers like it, bring me back to Vegas, I perform, I fool them, which would be the thing that didn't happen last time. And if I fool them, then there's no way it can't air. And that's exactly what happened. And so, had I not failed in season 6, I wouldn't have this trophy. It would have aired, it would have been great
Yeah.
for TV, but things wouldn't have been the same.
That's that's awesome, and I'm glad you shared that because I think that's the other part of it is sometimes we don't realize, and it's hard when you're in the moment to realize to see that in the sense of what of kind of like, oh crap, this happened to me and this is what it is, but you don't see the larger picture at the end of the journey sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, do you so I'm just kind of curious, just because of like obviously the psyche, the mental, thinking of things like this. Are you one of those that Are you someone who believes or does like positive affirmations? What's like a daily routine for you when it comes to something like that, and what are ways that maybe you can kind of provide and kind of help small business? Heck, anyone who's listening who doesn't even have a small business. One of my questions that I'll be asking is, like what is something you want to, if you were to start something, what would it be? So I'm just kind of curious, like, is there something that you can, exercises or things that you can help strengthen your mind, or at least, I guess, get your mind in a better mindset to be able to either, I know some people do positive affirmations, and then just kind of, I just feel like we're in a place right now where there's so much negativity, and negativity somehow always creeps up in your mind. And it's always like a battle of trying to get that positive, like the positive side out, and be able to think that way. We always think of like what's the worst that's going to happen, not what's going to be the best that's going to happen. And I'm just kind of curious, like if there's things that you kind of do on a day to day to kind of help battle those things, or maybe help us battle those things.
Yeah, these are great questions. I think in line in line with like the positive affirmations and stuff, I think just generally being positive and optimistic, it's like it's got to do with perception and the way you perceive things. Not even like there's the glass half empty, glass half full thing, but the important thing is that you choose which you see. And that's not, people don't think of it like that, but you have a
Yeah.
choice. And when you change the way that you look at things, the things you look at change. And so you're right, it's really difficult because in that moment when I got rejected from airing in season 6, people were telling me things like, oh, it's all right, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and you can't see it in that moment. And it's like, well, why couldn't I be here? And so it took me like 3 days of feeling pretty hopeless before I was like, okay, well, there's only one way to turn this around. We need to make it be okay by doing this and that. And fortunately, it all worked out. But I think generally, I'm pretty positive, optimistic. And then gratitude is a massive thing because we have a negative bias. Every day you start your car and you get in and it drives perfectly, but the day you go to start your car and it doesn't, you flip out and it's like, oh, just my luck. Why does everything bad happen to me? And it's we put so much weight on the negative things while overlooking the things that are going right. And so one great exercise is called 3 good things. At the end of the day, you write down 3 things that you're grateful for. Another thing is like, what was the best part of your day? Just recapping what was the best part of my day. Journaling is another massive thing you can do, mindfulness. I'd never felt as good as I'd felt in life as I did when I was getting up early. It was like 5:30 in the morning. I would go for a run around Crane's Roost, the lake
Okay.
over here, and as I was finishing up, catch the sunrise, go home, hop in the shower, meditate, and then start my day. And I feel so accomplished before people have gotten out of bed, even. And so, just those healthy routines, there's as much, you get as much serotonin from 15 minutes of aerobic exercise as you do a Prozac. So, exercise, mindfulness, gratitude, I think those are all really good keys to changing your perception of life. And then stoicism, because I could go on these topics all day, but the idea of stoicism, just the basic philosophy that things are neither good nor bad, they just are. And you never know, because I could have said, oh, this is so bad that I didn't air in season 6, but it turned out to kind of be good because it led to season 7, and you just don't ever know in the moment. So
Yeah.
you only control the things you can control, which is yourself.
I love that, dude. No, I totally agree with that in the sense I all amazing practices that I hope if you're having struggles and things like that, it's definitely something a great way to be able to start your day and be able to do that. And I think the idea we do roses and thorns in my house. So we'll do like best part of the day, worst part of the day. I do a lot of gratefulness. I do type of things like that, and I haven't done too much mindful journaling, but it's something that like usually try to do. And I've kind of gotten a little out of practice, but I usually do like top. I kind of did it in small bite sizes, so I'll do like top 5 things I'm grateful for. Then I'll do like 5 things that like affirmations or things that I want to I want to believe in, and then I made it so it's like somewhat constructive as well. So it's like 5 to dos, but or like 5 things that I want to do or goals. And then I kind of do that every day to kind of give myself something to kind of look into or at least be able to appreciate because it really does change that mind flip is it's amazing how you can see things and perceive things when you actually take the time to kind of think maybe a little bit differently than the usual thing that creeps up on you. So I definitely appreciate those great tactics and ideas. What is the goal? Is the goal to be like have a show in like Vegas or somewhere where you're constantly performing every night? Is it you doing I guess a series of shows where you're traveling the world? What is the let's put it out there. What is it that you want? Like what's the what you're working towards that you want to accomplish?
So I always say this, and it's kind of funny. If you go on my Instagram at Kong Mentalist and look through the reels, you'll find one. I look really young. I can't remember how. It's it's got to be at least 10 years old. And I'm doing an interview similar to this. It's like a public access TV show in New York. And they ask me what the goal is or something. And I say, the goal really is to just be happy and stay happy and do whatever makes me happy. And I think that's it. A lot of the things that you touched on are part of it. Like, yes, I would like to do a residency show, maybe not in Las Vegas, but elsewhere. And then the other thing is, yeah, I love to travel. I've been to I think 33 countries so far, which is amazing, and I want to
Yeah.
get to them all. So touring and performing is still part of the plan, and I think it'll change. Like there's a chance that one day I'll wake up and be like, I don't know, maybe instead of performing, I want to do this thing. Like
Yeah.
that could happen. I'm
Yeah.
just not like I love performing. I love making people happy and I love everything that goes into it. But I also just want the freedom and flexibility to do whatever makes me happy.
No, I like that. What since you travel and you've done so many like corporate type events, can you give me one where and obviously you mentioned the swingers one, which I think would probably maybe the answer, but is there anyone that you kind of like have done that you're like you want to have me or you're like, "Oh, I did not expect to be doing performing to for these people like and like at a conference or something that it could be like for whatever it is. Have you ever had one of those where it kind of just like kind of was like surprising of like the not really the clientele and you don't have to and obviously I don't want you to because I hope that they invite you back because you did so well, but is there anyone that you would either surprised you or some people may find a bit odd that they had you on had you there to kind of do to kind of talk with the crowd and interact?
Yeah, the swingers one would definitely be one, but then there's also been certain religious groups with their own special practices and customs that you have to kind of adhere to. There's there's shows that I won't do anymore. Like for example, if you want a kids performer, I'm not the guy, and I'd be happy to recommend someone, but I'd be doing you a disservice if I came and did your kids show. So I just won't do it because I feel
Yeah.
like there's other people better suited. And so I've learned that the hard way years ago, and it's so funny because the kids are just completely lost, but the parents are like, "Oh, that's quite good. They're really attentive." It's just such a variety. I get to do. I did another Indian wedding not too long ago, and those are always nice. They go really all out. And it's interesting. It's like sometimes I'll be in the nicest, fanciest theaters, and at other times I'll be in the corner of a campus library or in someone's living room for their baby shower. And as
Oh
long as I
wow.
feel I can, as long as they have the budget and I feel that I can deliver well and satisfy their needs, make everyone happy, and like boost the event, I'll do it because entertainment is definitely the thing that people will talk about, whether it was really good or really bad.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. One something that I read or I may have heard. You had an advice about perfecting fundamentals before specializing. I don't know. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? On like, because I'm just, and I think it's kind of similar to kind of almost you reading this or kind of me saying this. It almost kind of reminds me of like kind of like even what you mentioned of like what you do as a mentalist versus other forms of magic and other forms of entertainment. But I'm kind of curious if you can kind of like add a little bit more to that information on that.
Yeah, so I believe that where you would have read that was, I think I want to say advice to like aspiring magicians or
Yeah,
performers.
probably.
And what I did when I started, I wasn't just a mentalist. I would learn a little bit about card tricks and coin tricks and a little bit of mental magic and escapology. Like I have memories from when I was 12 of being handcuffed and shackled and thrown in my neighbor's pool to try to escape. Things like that. So I just wanted to learn a little bit from every area because you never know where it'll cross over. For example, if we're talking to small businesses, maybe I'm an entertainer, so I could read books on how to market your entertainment business. But then maybe I come across a book on how to market your food truck, and something in there stands out to me that hasn't been tried in my industry, and I find a way to make it cross over. And it's the same thing with different practices in the same field. So I recommend getting a, a pretty extensive surface level knowledge before you then decide, okay, this is what I want to specialize in. If for no other reason, just so you know that this is the thing you want to do. Because, like I said, for about 4 years, I was like, yeah, magic, I'm a magician. And then I find out about mentalism, and it's like, this is what I've been doing the whole time. Like, this is what I've been missing.
Yeah. That's awesome. I got two more questions for you, and then we're done. Unless there's things you want to bring up or talk about that that I've missed, or things you may have captured from talking with me that you think of, or by all means, share that. But one of my questions that I have that I ask a lot of my guests is, and I know you've touched on it on some of these things, so I don't know if you'll say the same thing or kind of go back to it. But what advice would you have for someone wanting to start something?
Start. I mean, we talked about it, but just taking the first steps, taking action, and also be careful where you set your targets. So, for example, you may look at someone and be like, that's who I want to be, that I want to be like this guy, performing at this level, or making X amount of money, or doing this thing. And then as you grow in the career, you find like, wow, maybe that guy's not where the limit's at. Maybe I should have been aspiring even further and to
Yeah.
go higher. And so yeah, be careful of that because I think when it comes to things like raising your fees, for instance, yes, obviously you have to have a good product to begin with. But one of the biggest hurdles beyond that is a mental hurdle because you're so used to it goes like it's similar to the rejection thing. You're so used to being in this comfort zone. And now to branch out of that, it can be hard. So choose your mentors wisely and set your targets wisely, but above anything else, just get started.
Is there, and obviously I know that there's like Orlando magicians, and there's central, like there's different, but is there like organizations and groups that you are part of? I know networking, obviously that's kind of actually how I was introduced to you. My college roommate met you at a networking event, and he actually was the first thing, he's like, Biggie, you need to have Keith on, he'd be great for you two to chat. And I was like, okay. I'm like, that sounds good. And I'm like, and then I knew who you were. So then I was like, this will be fun. I'm like, this will be something very different for me. And at the same time, like, I'm intrigued, hence all the questions. So like, can you talk, is there like groups and stuff like that? Is there a pretty large population here in Central Florida or in Florida in general?
Florida is a massive market for it because we have lots of events and people that come to town. But there are events groups and just networking groups all over. People know about BNIs and Chamber of Commerce events and things like that. For me, I'm in groups like MPI, Meeting Planners International, and ILEA, like industry specific groups that work with events and stuff. I feel offer me the most mileage.
Yeah.
But networking in general is massive. It's word of mouth, for example, is a huge part of my business. People see me perform and they either want to book me back for more events or they tell their friends, like, Keith did such a great job for us and maybe you should have him too. And that's the best. Like, it's literally the best compliment that someone can give me is a referral, because I really appreciate it, but also it means so much to me that I'm going to work really hard to not let that person look bad for introducing me. Like, I want to
Yeah.
do a good job for everyone. So networking goes beyond the groups. It's things like just saying hi to people, starting conversations, because you never know who can introduce you to who or work with you in this way or that way. We look at LinkedIn, another online networking tool, and we see how often it happens where there's someone you never heard of before, and it turns out you're just one or two connections away from them. We talk about the 8 degrees of separation, but I feel that with globalization, that has shrunk. And we're like many less degrees of separation away from anybody. Like in my industry, I don't know David Copperfield. Everyone's heard of David Copperfield, but if I really needed to get Copperfield on the phone tomorrow, I feel like I could make it happen through a few connections.
Yeah.
So there's no reason that that can't apply to your business as well.
Yeah. No, and I think that's also the key of constantly network and constantly and you never know who. I also look at it as, and I kind of always gone the route of like and I tell my daughter this, like I'm like, I treat everyone the way I want to be treated, just because a lot of times you have no idea the person that where someone is starting and where they're going to end up at, and how you're going to see them again across the, on your, how you may cross paths again in on your journey. And who knows, when as you interact and create those, meet those people remember how you interacted with them initially, and especially when you meet again and have interactions with them in the future. So
Yeah.
and
And
sometimes opportunities come from those interactions, and that's, I totally agree with the word of mouth, though. I think it's kind of like the greatest thing ever, especially with like with my brand, when I see people posting or people sharing things, and I'm pretty sure like you probably love like when people are either commenting, sharing, subscribing to, if you're on, on your YouTube page. I know you got a bunch of ways people can follow you. We'll kind of talk about that, like how people can follow you and be able to see you, and kind of be able to kind of connect with you online and socially, as well as also I think you have a mailing list. Talk a little bit about that and how people can, reach out to you and connect with you.
yeah, so my website is kongmentalist.com, Kong mentalist.com. And if you go on there, within probably 30 seconds, you'll get a little pop up form to join the mailing list, which is where you'll find out. In fact, you asked me about certain goals, what are your
Yeah.
aspirations, and stuff like that. Some of the things that you touched on are actually sort of in the works right now. So if you
Okay.
want to be the first to get notified of that, I'm not able to say yet, but the best place would be to join the mailing list. I don't spam people. In fact, fortunately, like sometimes people respond to my emails and say really nice things like, I love reading your emails, I love getting your emails, which is kind of unheard of. So if anything, I need to be emailing more. But if you go to kongmentalist.com/links, LINKS, that will bring you to something sort of like a link tree where you'll see all the important links. You'll see the homepage to the website, the mailing list, you'll see the Penn and Teller Fool Us link, as well as a link to Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those things.
Yeah, and I'll have all those as well in the show notes, because I'll have Keith give me all those things so that I can kind of provide those links. So you'll be able to see them on the show notes. So as you're watching, as you're listening or watching or anything like that, you can pretty much go on, whether you're on Apple or Spotify, YouTube, whatever. You'll be able to kind of click on the links and see that, because I put the links on all my all of that. So you'll be able to definitely see that. Keith, I really appreciate you taking time to chat with me today. It's definitely great meeting you. First time we've ever met. I definitely appreciate your time. I think it's was definitely a blast. I look forward to we'll kind of chat about having you maybe share some, maybe your favorite reel or something of performances and things like that you've done, that we can maybe share to give people a better idea of some of the what you've accomplished. Not to mention, you can obviously go and check them out online to be able to see that. But I really appreciate you taking the time to actually chat with me and be able to share your story, and be able for me to be able to get to know you a little better.
Yeah, Biggie, thanks for having me. Lunch was fantastic.
Well, good. I appreciate that. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much to Keith Kong, the Mentalist, for being on and having lunch with me. Definitely make sure to check him out. Like I said, it'll be on the notes, but as you're listening to this, you could definitely, by all means, scroll on there and start giving him a follow on social. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to tell your friends. If you want to support me, check out my brand, Deli Fresh Threads. Do some shopping. Obviously, sandwich selfies are always encouraged. Thank you. Until next time, keep eating sandwiches and follow your passion. So